Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Ripened Heart podcast. Today, I am so excited to be joined by Fiona Edgar. She's an astrologer in Northern Ireland, and she has over 20 years of experience. She runs her own astrology school. She does astrology readings of all kinds, and she's just such a wealth of information. There's so many specialties that Fiona has that I think are really rare in the field of astrology. And the other reason I wanted to have her on today is because I really like Fiona's approach to astrology. While she's not the lovey-dovey astrologer, she's also not the type of astrologer that's constantly dumping you with fear after fear. I think Fiona has such a good balanced approach of honesty with also being helpful and helping us to prepare for more challenging energies like what we've been experiencing in the past year and continue to experience. And so Fiona's forecasts are really the only ones I listen to at this point, but besides of course, talking my ear off about astrology as well. So I'm so excited to have her on today. Welcome, Fiona.
Thanks so much, Kaylee. It's really nice to be here and speak with you today.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and some of the things that you specialize in your astrology work?
Sure. Well, I've been pretty much obsessed with astrology now for, I think it's over 20 years now. I first got introduced to astrology by my oldest sister, and she had a book. I honestly can't remember the author, but it kind of went into your rising sign as
Oh,
well as your sun sign. So I was like, oh, it says I'm Gemini rising. Well, that explains this part of my personality. I am a Cancer, but I definitely am a Gemini rising. I talk a lot. I talk with my hands. I'm an information junkie, and my mind is just constantly ticking. So that kind of caused me to start to study it more in depth, and then I went into moon signs and all of the other planets, and really from that moment I was hooked on astrology.
Yeah. And so these days, what aspects of the chart, whether it be the moon sign or the rising, what's your favorite go-to look at to really get a grasp of the person when you're first glancing at a chart?
I would say the moon sign. The moon is who we truly are,
Mm-hmm.
because in karmic astrology the moon actually represents your kind of collective past lives.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, that's like the personality or the character that has been built up over multiple lifetimes. And the sun, of course, is our general personality. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's always going to be the moon. I mean, I heard that if you go to India and you ask someone what their sign is, that they will give you the moon sign.
Wow. Yeah. That's fascinating. And I think, it's the moon that really dictates how you'll handle things in the day to day and when challenges come up. So it's kind of like, your true self in a way, whereas the sun is who you kind of try to present yourself to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, I was born under a Scorpio moon, so collectively secrets, occult activities, stuff like astrology, probably persecution, those are all themes of my past lives.
Yeah.
So someone that's born under a Scorpio moon, they will naturally be guarded, a bit suspicious. And the reason for that is because that they have dealt with some level of, persecution.
Yeah, so go into that a little bit more because one of your specialties is karmic astrology. And so, what does that entail? What do you look at in a chart to kind of get the details of past lives?
Okay, so the moon would be the main one first and foremost.
Okay.
And it would be the sign that the moon is in, and it would also be the aspects that the moon is making to the other planets, and of course the house as well. But we can also look at Saturn. So Saturn is known as the Lord of Karma.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever Saturn is placed, whatever sign it's in, that gives us an idea of where that person needs to work a little bit harder. in
Mm.
terms of, achieving some kind of structure in their life. But it's also where they're challenged because something has gone, well, not gone wrong, but it's been an area that they haven't fully explored in their past lives, for one reason or another. So I would look at that. And then, of course, I would look at Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes of the moon.
Yeah.
So the south node in someone's chart, that will show again stuff from past lives, where when that person is born, their natural the natural path that they want to take will be shown in the south node.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's their comfort zone and it feels familiar to them. But as they get older, then they're drawn to go towards the north nodes because that in itself is a path that they have not really taken in other lifetimes. So, I mean, just to use my own chart as an example again, my south node is in Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
So, astrology, a touch of the mad scientist, um, that kind of oddball that
Yeah, I love it.
doesn't really relate to other people. But then, as I got older, and it was really through the work that I'm doing in astrology, I began to embrace my Leo North Node. And that is someone that can take the spotlight, can do podcasts
Mm-hmm.
and put themselves out there and really shine in a certain area. So I think it's not about walking away from the south node, but really having a balance between the two.
Absolutely. And it's just interesting how the challenges that we face and the things that happen in our lives, the people and circumstances we attract really push us toward that north node. I've definitely seen that in my own life. And even having a nodal opposition right now, because my north node is in Sagittarius in the eighth house. It's been interesting with the south node being in Sagittarius. I see some of those themes even playing out for me in an opposition to push me toward Sagittarius being more spontaneous. I mean, last year when we had the fires in Portland, I had to spontaneously take a 7 to 8 hour road trip to Idaho, which I had never been before. It's just like, and it was right after eclipse season. So it's been fascinating. But it also, while it's uncomfortable, it's cool to see how much you transform and how much you grow when you're pushed toward that north node and embracing the positive qualities of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny that it always seems to be a little bit of, a little bit of trauma or a little bit of something upsetting our daily lives that really pushes us into the North Node.
Yeah.
That's what I found in my own life.
Yeah.
Some issues that I had and, some trauma. I really learned how to stand up for myself in
Yeah.
a way that was very Leo, because Leo is a powerful sign. It's the lion. It's no one pushes the lion around.
They better not.
Yeah, they're going to get eaten. So
Yeah.
yeah, you have to, it gets easier the older that you are.
Yeah.
In Vedic astrology, and I would agree with this, they see the nodes as being malefic.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it can be, it's a difficult area. It's not easy reaching your destiny sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy dropping your karmic baggage. So none of that is really going to be easy flowing.
Yeah, that brings me to a question. So, there's people that say that, everything in life is working for your favor, pushing you toward your destiny. And I definitely agree with that. But then when you put in it in terms of the lens of karmic astrology and some planets being malefic, where does that stand? What is that, in that polarity between pushing us toward our destiny and our best life and also karma being played out? Do you see it as a dance between the two in a chart and what events play out for us?
Yeah, I would say that if you're talking about destiny and fate,
Yeah.
and I firmly believe in that, I'm a pagan.
Yeah.
I'm a Norse pagan, and for me, the fate is controlled by the Norns, the three goddesses of fates. They were known as the Fates, and I think it was the Roman polytheism and the Morai. I think that was Greek.
Uh-huh.
So we see the same three, in a lot of different cultures. But for me, the destiny is really symbolized in the fixed stars as well, which is why I think that it's hugely important to use both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it brings up that, age-old question of how much control do we actually have over our lives? Is it, things coming in as fate? And it's a dance between us kind of surrendering to our fate and to the guidance that we get and to where we're pulled toward in life. And then, bringing that Saturn element in of personal responsibility. And it's something that I think about a lot, that dance between those two.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we do have a plan that's laid out for us, but we did agree to this on some level before we decided to come here and take that path. But I'll give you a little tip.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that I don't know if any other Western astrologers do this, but it's quite common with the Vedic astrologers. I mean, with their system, we're looking at something that has been unbroken and uncorrupted.
Yeah.
Not like our system where it was banned and you could get burnt at the stake for practicing it, and all of that lovely stuff that we had to go
Yeah.
through. But if you have a really difficult aspect in your chart that points towards some kind of karmic tricky area,
Mm-hmm.
you can do a ritual to remedy it.
Mm.
Okay, so for me personally, I work with the Norns because I am a Norse pagan.
Yeah.
So what I did was I wrote everything down about that certain placement that I had in my chart that I didn't want anymore. And of course, you're never going to get rid of it completely,
Right.
but you can soothe it. It can become a little bit easier. So I wrote it all down. I burnt it and I offered the smoke to the Norns.
Wow. I love that. You read my mind because one of my questions here was how does one get through difficult transits? How do you lessen the blow? And that sounds like a great thing to do, just, whether it be a tricky area in the chart or whether you're going through a harsh aspect or transit. So do you do that with transits too then, Fiona?
I've only ever done that once, to change the course of my life, in quite a dramatic way.
Yeah.
But in terms of difficult transits, I think that if you are an astrologer or if you are a client of an astrologer, being forewarned is being forearmed. But again, you kind of know what to expect in terms of something like a really brutal Pluto transit.
Mm-hmm.
You will know, okay, my life is going to change in a highly dramatic way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing really that you can do about that except man up and deal with it, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, I had Pluto and I had Saturn and I had Jupiter all transiting my 8th house.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. So Pluto is still in there. He's going to be in there for another few years, but you just have to see the gold amongst the madness. There's always going to be gold. If you are in a place where you're not using your natural talents, your natural gifts, maybe you're wasting your time on a bad relationship, or you're just not fulfilling your potential, Pluto will come along and force you to stand up and own your life and make changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting because I had all of that going through my 10th house and with Pluto still left in there, and the because I'm training to be a homeopath, and I have Neptune in my 10th natally, and Uranus, it's been huge transformation through my work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been very challenging at times, but it's kind of amazing, like, because I wouldn't have read it that way. Like if I had another career, I'm not sure it would have played out the same way. Maybe Pluto would have been like, you're fired, or you got to get out of this job, or whatnot. That's kind of what I was expecting. I was like, oh, am I going to get fired last year? I was like, it kind of seems like it, but somehow I pulled through 2020, which I'm grateful for. But my day job, I mean, and so it's amazing. I think I have a Pluto sextile right now, natal Pluto, something like that. There's tons transformation going on in my chart right now, and it's been so good to have an awareness and an objective context of what is happening, so that you can work with the energy to benefit you, even if it's challenging, rather than, just kind of being like la-di-da and not really know what's going on, and not being able to work with it, or to see your blind spots, or to see what's trying to be transformed. It's so helpful. And it kind of brings me to the quote that you have on the front of your website, is that only with astrology can we answer the question of why am I here? And I think that that's something that is such a huge question during these times, because there has been so much transformation in the work world, in particular with everything the past year, people getting fired, people having to transition out of jobs, people having to spend more time with themselves, and they're have had to get real about what's working in their lives and what's not working in their lives. And so my question for you is, how do you work with that question with people, and how does astrology answer the question of why somebody's here, for people who aren't super familiar?
Yeah, I think so many people spend their lives trying to conform to societal expectations of them, or the life that their family wants for them, but they really just have no clue about what it is that they really want to do to be happy. And everyone's chart is going to be different in some way, unless they're identical twins. So if someone, everything is in the chart, your skills, your gifts, your strengths, your weaknesses. So a good astrologer will be able to tell you where you're supposed to go in your life within 5 minutes.
Wow.
Because maybe someone is working in a bank, and they're just in normie land, and nothing's
I love that.
it's not fitting them, and it's not really suiting the type of person or the type of soul that they are. And they're not fulfilling their potential as to why they came into this incarnation at this particular time. So that's when you will get stuff like they're fired.
Yeah.
They're fired, everything goes wrong. Every time they try to go to work, their car breaks down, they're in traffic jams. That's the universe's way of trying to tell them that they're on the wrong path.
Yes.
When it's one blockage after another. Before I became a professional astrologer, I worked in IT. And it was not, it was not fulfilling on a spiritual level, and I think that goes without saying. And it was my ex, actually, who really encouraged me to become a professional astrologer. He's like, you're really good at this, you could totally make a career out of this. So as I was pondering that, and then I set up my business and I started doing readings for people, it takes a while to get established when you're doing this kind of work. But what I found then is that any time that I went for a regular interview for like a normie job, I didn't get it. Wow. And I have Gemini rising. I'm awesome at interviews.
Yeah.
So it was the universe saying, no, you're not going back to that. You have to put all of your energy into this and focus on this.
Looking back at your chart during that time, could you see why you were being pushed to astrology at that particular moment?
Yeah, I had a really good idea, Yeah. I can't actually remember the transits that I was under at the time, but I knew that's what was happening.
Oh yeah.
So it meant being a little broke for a while.
Yeah.
While I, wrote articles every day and really poured all of my energy into creating this. But I will say that I was always supported by the gods, by the universe. I always had enough money to pay my bills.
And I think that that's so important for people to hear, because I know a lot of people who listen to my podcast, they are in alternative careers. And some of them are more at the beginning, like I am. Maybe they're going through their Saturn return, um, or they're just transitioning into a different career because they've realized in the past year or so that they need to, and that they might as well just go for what they're really meant to do. And it's just always good to hear from people who had the courage to be their own boss and made it work and made it happen and are still making it happen years later. Um, and so I just think it's so encouraging to hear that. And because I totally know what you mean. It's like, when you take that leap of faith, if it's right for you, it's going to have some sort of flow to it. And there's going to be some sort of assistance there, because, the world needs more people who are awake and who aren't just doing the 9 to 5, and who are helping people during these challenging times as guides or as astrologers or whatever it is. And so I feel like more than ever, the universe is gonna support that transition for people.
Yeah, yeah, you're totally right, and they will notice that they are supported.
Yeah.
You're getting worried about what's in your bank account, and then all of a sudden, if you're an astrologer or any other kind of alternative profession,
Yeah.
you'll just get a couple of clients, and it will tide you over.
Hmm.
Like I said, when you're on the wrong path, you'll get blockages everywhere, but when you're on the right path, things just seems to, things fall into place very easily.
And so that brings me to a question I have, because from doing human design readings, I can notice this in my clients too, is that sometimes there can be a tendency to look at aspects of the chart and to have fear, or to have it become like a self-fulfilling prophecy or a limitation or an excuse as to why something can't happen. Like, let's say Uranus and Taurus in somebody's second house. Well, I'm scared, to transition out of this job because it might be unstable in my bank account, or I have this placement in this house, so that means that I can't do that. Have you seen that in people at all, that they kind of can, grip onto fear in their chart? And how do you help people through that?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of fear at times that you have to help people through and encourage them. Someone, say for example, with the Uranus and Taurus in their second house, that's someone that was born to be a catalyst for change in terms of the financial structure.
Mm-hmm.
And also then they would tend to make a lot of money in work that is considered kind of unusual, or work connected to the internet, computers, stuff like that. So there's always a downside and there's always a negative side. It's just choosing to believe in yourself and going with you know, choosing to be positive and choosing to be strong, I think.
Yeah, and it's just something that I noticed, is that there is just a lot of fear being pumped out from some people in the astrology community. That, it's good to be honest, obviously, but it's just talking to friends of mine and clients, and I succumb to this at times as well. It's like you because times are so uncertain, you can kind of like cling to that astrology forecast for safety, or like have it dictate too much of your life, or too much of, how you see the world. And that's why I was saying in my intro that I feel like you have such a good balance with that, where you say it how it is, but you're not pumping it full of fear, and you're giving solutions. And so was that something that you had to grow into over time as an astrologer, and have you observed that too?
Well, I mean, I've got Mars in my ascendant conjunct Mercury, so
Yeah.
I can't keep it in, even if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And I've also got Scorpio moon,
Yeah.
and Scorpio moon speaks the truth. It
Oh, yeah.
tells it how it is. Um, and the world right now is not a safe place.
Yeah.
We don't have any comfort zones. That really started to end as soon as Uranus went into Taurus,
Yeah.
because Taurus is like your safety, everything's the same, you're plodding along, you've got money in the bank, and then Uranus just comes in and wrecks it all and changes it. So there's really no such thing as safety in the world right now. So
Mm-hmm.
for me to say, and I have seen this, I'm sure you've seen me make comments about the unicorn astrologers, because I really, you know, for like, to me, astrology is so sacred,
Yes.
and it's such a beautiful science, that to see it completely ruined by people who only choose to talk about certain like unicorn things so they get more views on YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how much that actually disgusts me.
Yeah.
And not only that, but they're really misleading people,
Mm-hmm.
because like you say, people are going to latch on to any kind of hope that they have. And
Exactly.
it's not to say that everything is doom and gloom right now. There's a lot of good stuff happening, particularly in the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual realms. But I don't like people that lie to others and to their clients. Maybe they're just incompetent astrologers. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure. But life is so complex.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful, but so painful at the same time. And the planets, the stars, they are always reflecting that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that brings me to a question I've been thinking about. Has there been a particular planetary archetype in your life that has you've worked with that's been particularly transformational for you?
Oh, I think it's got to be Pluto. It has
Yeah.
to be. It has to be Pluto. Pluto is, the big daddy of the underworld,
Yeah.
and I've been walking with Pluto since I was very young, because I grew up and I was surrounded by, I grew up in Northern Ireland when the troubles, as they call them, were very bad,
Hmm.
and it was that sense of, not knowing if your father was going to come home that day,
Right.
not knowing if a bomb was going to go off somewhere when you're just out shopping with your mom, stuff like that. So
Hmm.
I've had a very Plutonian life.
Hmm.
And for like, to me, I will take, honestly, I really mean this, I will take a hard Pluto transit any day above, say, a weak trine from Jupiter, because anytime that I go through the underworld, I come out on the other side, and I'm stronger, I'm better, and I'm richer for it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I completely agree with you. It's been something, I guess I have a pretty full 12th house. I've got Pluto and Scorpio. I've got, North Node in the eighth house. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a stranger to underworld archetypes. And it's been so fascinating even to learn about some of the homeopathic remedies that are based on these archetypes. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm really expanding my study in, because there's metals that have been discovered that are radioactive in nature, that were named after the planets, like the underworld planets, like Neptunium, Plutonium, uranium. And I see them when there's like, for example, during that harsh T square, people were getting these radioactive elements more.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that. And there seems to really be a correlation between, because in homeopathy, when I see certain remedy groups come up in practice, I know that those archetypes are wanting to be heard and known. And it's interesting when there's patterns like that that relate to the astrology. And I'm wondering, I know there's some homeopaths that even give these remedies for difficult Pluto transits or Uranus transits or Neptune transits, to help work through that. And when you look at the remedies in homeopathy, I mean, they're definitely no joke, but at the same time, it's like you said, it's like at the other side is like, if you work with it, in homeopathy, you would take the remedy, it's diluted, it's basically informational in nature. You work with that archetype in that way, and you're not going to be the same person that you were before on the other end of that. And it's the same with the transit. And it's beautiful, because otherwise, we could be complacent or stuck, or we wouldn't have those experiences that pushed us. Like if you weren't bored at the IT job, and say you had gotten hired at one of the the jobs that you did apply for, who knows, where you would be today. And so it's that resistance, that challenge, that I totally agree. It's necessary, and it's almost like it's like fun in a weird way to go through, because like you said, it's going to be just massive transformation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fantastic that we can combine, your knowledge of homeopathy and with astrology.
Yeah.
Because if we look back there was a very famous physician called Nicholas Culpeper.
Mm.
And so he was alive, I think it was the 1600s, but he was an astrologer.
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind of like a renegade astrologer that would and physician that would treat the poor for really cheap and things like that. He's a fantastic character, but he would prescribe herbs based on the person's birth chart, because each
Oh.
plant has a planetary correlation, so it's the same idea as the homeopathy.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I have a herb book like that I haven't gotten a chance to dive into, but I know it's super cool, and it just goes to show that these kind of living archetypes are present everywhere. They're not just in the stars. There's plants that have that same consciousness. There's minerals that have the same consciousness. There's animals that have the same consciousness. Everywhere, whether it's a bird energy or a mineral energy or plant energy, they're all echoing some of these similar archetypes that we see in the stars. So we could just see that we're surrounded by these archetypes because they're here to teach us something. They're
Yeah.
to help us to transform. I mean, like the vulture in homeopathy is a very underworld kind of, character that people can call upon and take this remedy to help them get through, and there's this idea that I've read about that I want to get your take on, Fiona, about transmuting your own chart. And so it sounded like you were kind of working with that concept when you were doing your ritual. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Okay, and what was it, transmuting your charts?
Yeah, transmuting some of the energy in your chart.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it depends on kind of what the energy is,
Yeah.
but let's use the ancestral stuff as a
Yeah.
good example of that, okay? So, I mean, we know that people nowadays are just really riddled with ancestral trauma.
Mm-hmm.
We're not getting the right remedies for that anymore, and it's really is largely because of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Because in that religion, you don't have to worry about your ancestors. If you've done anything wrong or whatever, you just say sorry to the god, and that's pretty much it. You repent. And of course it doesn't really work like that. So we have people over and over again that are living out the same stories that their fathers, their mothers, stuff that happened to them, and it's really a kind of never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I would do when I go to check someone's chart for ancestral stuff, I would look at the IC. Okay. So the IC is the cusp of the fourth house. It's the lowest point in the chart, and it will tell me what the dominant theme is there simply by the sign and its ruler.
Mm.
Okay. So I've got Leo on my IC, which is of course ruled by the sun. I have ancestral trauma on my father's side, and I was aware of that by, just stuff that happened over and over again. My son is also in square to Pluto. So transmuting that, I mean, honestly, the best thing that anyone can do is to go on their pre-Christian, polytheistic, ancestral spiritual path.
Yeah, take us through a little bit about how you discovered yours, because you're the one who really inspired me to do that myself. Recently got an ancestry test. I'm very Welsh and kind of a tour of Europe in a way. And I agree, it's been a really liberating experience to connect to those ancestors, especially now. And so take us through a little bit about what inspired you and how you got onto your ancestral path and how that's helped.
Sure. Well, I've been a pagan, I guess, for probably about 20 years, more than that. I've never been a Christian. I was forced to go to Sunday school when I was a kid, and I just felt a profound lack of respect for this person that was telling us to turn the other cheek and, you know, to grovel and say that we're sinners. And I was only like 7 years old at the time, and I just, you know, I felt so angry because I knew even then that something was not right about that. But my oldest sister introduced me to a lot of things. She's 10 years older than me. And she took me to, we did a lot of crazy things together. Like, she took me to a spiritualist church, and, you know, they were doing mediumship. But really, I only kind of felt like I was starting to get to where I wanted to be when I was researching. I started to research paganism, because no one really talks about here in Ireland, especially, they don't really talk about the native gods and goddesses in the land. You know, they've even tried to connect our sacred sites, which are so old, to Christianity, which is of course fairly new. And they've really tried to kind of erase all of that wisdom that came before Christianity. So as I was researching that, I actually felt very drawn to initially the Egyptian pantheon. And I think a lot of people do. And really, it's Indo-European in origin. So that's why I kind of felt such a pull towards that. And I did a lot of things. You know, I've done a lot of, I was in the OTO for a while, didn't really enjoy it. Did traditional witchcraft. Really, I was kind of eclectic and did a lot of crazy shit. And I just have a thirst for knowledge. And with Mars on the ascendant, I don't really have a fear of anything. So then eventually I was meditating one day, and I kind of looked outside, and I very clearly saw Odin's face in the clouds.
Wow.
And I knew it was Odin because the archetype, or the image of Odin, is recognizable to a lot of people, even if they're not pagan, because the All-Father never went away. Even throughout the dark ages of Christianity, he was still popping up, you know. The archetype of Merlin is one example of Odin. But anyways, so I actually started to do some, I found out the kind of Norse Wheel of the Year, and I started to do some research on the other gods and goddesses. And I was like, okay, I'm going to work with this. It was just something very profound that I felt in my soul. And this was before, many, many years before I actually discovered that I'm part Danish. I'm almost a quarter Danish. And I had a fair idea there was something like that going on, because a lot of the surnames in my family stem from Old Norse. Because, of course, the Vikings settled in Ireland. You know, they came here, they liked the women, so they stayed. And the rest is history. So I started to do the rituals. It's really important to follow the polytheistic wheel of the year. And if you think about it, the Western tropical birth chart is actually a calendar of that. Because it's based on the equinoxes and the solstices, which is what a pagan will work with. We do rituals on those days. It's important to know that when you're doing a ritual, for example, on the spring equinox, and you're honoring a deity who is connected to springtime, you're inviting that energy into your own life, so your own life can be transformed. So it's a remedy for stagnancy. It creates growth in your life, just as the flowers appear at springtime, all of the baby animals are born, the sun is coming back. It creates that type of energy and growth within your own life.
Yeah, I think it's so important that we're bringing this part into the conversation, because I don't know how many, times I've talked to specifically European people, and they feel like they have no culture. They are maybe ashamed of their ancestors, or, they're so far removed from where they came from in their traditions. And what they did, that, you know, they're just kind of plopped in America, for example, and they feel no connection. And then they try to seek for that connection through maybe other forms of spirituality. And, you know, it's not necessarily their ancestral path. And so it doesn't end up being as fulfilling, or, you know, it doesn't feel like that missing puzzle piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that really often, especially, you know, in my field, just because people tend to be more into spirituality, you know, when they're coming for human design or even homeopathy. And so I love bringing this into the conversation, because it's like, you don't have to feel like that. You don't have to feel rootless, you know? You don't have to have just hatred over, oh, these people came and conquered. And, you know, it's like there's no connection to what was before, and to all the ancestors that made, literally are in their DNA and made them who they are today. They weren't all just these bad people that we like to hear about, you know? It's
Mm.
tragic, really, that people aren't aware of this.
Yeah, and you know what? I disagree with that so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people's ancestors were they weren't rich. They were poor people. They went over there. They tried to make a life for themselves. My ancestors didn't own any slaves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be ashamed of any of my ancestors. Absolutely not. You see, that's a form of self-loathing. It's a very powerful black magic spell
Mm-hmm.
that they're cursing themselves with in their own life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very dark and dangerous thing to do. You know, as for people that say Europeans have no culture, I mean, have they ever read any books?
I know. I
You
know.
know, have they ever? Let's take a look at ancient Greece, the Romans, the Celts. You know, the Scandinavians. I mean, there's so much culture that was, especially from pre-Christian times.
Yeah.
Those traditions are still there.
Yeah.
They're still alive. I mean, a lot of the holidays are still celebrated even by non-pagans because it's tradition. It's been done for thousands and thousands of years. So I would say that those are very misguided people, and perhaps they should turn off their TVs.
I
And
Exactly. And I think you'd agree with this, Fiona, that I've seen it come up more since Chiron's been in Aries. You know,
yeah,
it's that identity wound that is just, we all have it in one way or another. For one person, it's about their ancestry. For one person, it's about their skin color or their orientation, whatever it is, you know. It's coming up in such a powerful way. And so on the positive side, I have also seen people get more curious about their background and about their ancestry, and hopefully can change that, you know, because I completely agree. And I mean, it's just like divorcing yourself from your ancestors. It really does have an impact on your life that I don't think people really understand and realize.
yeah. It makes them programmable. You
Hmm.
see,
Hmm.
they have no inner guidance coming from their ancestors, which really make up all of the DNA that's in their bodies.
Hmm.
So they have no inner compass. Then they look to people like Bill Gates to be their gods and their guides. And I mean, it was a very good trick that they played
Yeah.
to to remove people from their ancestry, because when someone starts to venerate their ancestral gods, what happens is they venerate those parts of their DNA, and stuff like family curses, wounds, hang-ups, they disappear. You literally shed that skin in a very short space of time, and it's really simple. You don't have to pay anyone to do it. It just takes a little bit of effort, and it just removes all of that kind of like psychological and spiritual baggage and damage that someone has accumulated, and presses a reset button on their life, and it realigns them to something important.
Absolutely. Um, I know it's amazing. And so when you say one of your specialties is in the ancestral astrology, what are some of the things that you do for your clients when looking at those family curses and seeing things pop up in their chart?
I would tell them to work with a specific deity to remedy what's going on. For me, with the, you know, with the paternal line thing going on and stuff with my dad and my grandfather, I started to get, my life started to change when I worked with the All-Father, Odin.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that I did not, there was a theme in my family of failed businesses.
Oh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that happened to my brother, my dad, my grandfather. So probably before that, but I don't really know about it going beyond that, but it probably did. And my business, you know, kind of, you know, I was earning okay, but it was very up and down. But when I started to work with Odin, it's like someone smashed down my door, and then I had like thousands of clients and a never-ending stream of business because it broke the curse.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And, you know, it's exactly that. And when you start, you know, looking into your ancestral path and building relationships with the gods that are on your specific ancestral path, it's amazing. And, you know, it's like, especially because, I mean, I don't know, I feel like every patient that walks through the door for homeopathy has issues with their parents, issues with their family line, and to be able to connect with, you know, those motherly or fatherly archetypes in a different way is just so transformational.
Yeah, absolutely. It is transformational, which of course is why they did not want you to do these practices anymore. You know, that's why you would have been burnt at the stake if you were caught worshipping a, you know, the goddess in the woods.
Yeah.
Not so long ago. We have to remember that. And
Yeah.
people are still under that Abrahamic spell. And
Yeah.
they're disempowering themselves. And time again, what I see is someone starting their ancestral path and they go from surviving to thriving.
Yeah, and it's either that, like you said, with the Abrahamic religion, or it's scientism, like you said, with Bill Gates, and um, being so fearful because you don't feel rooted, you don't have that powerful connection to your ancestors, so you can kind of just be blown about by the wind so easily. It's like a boat without a rudder, and it just, it makes sense why we are where we are right now, and in the very, very materialist paradigm where, you know, I doubt that anybody listening is in that if they've gotten this far into the podcast. But it's certainly the dominant paradigm. And so us talking the way we are, you know, maybe in our little bubble, we see people talking the same way we are, but it's like there's so many people that have no clue of what we're
Yeah.
talking about, that this is even an option.
Yeah. And the thing is that spirituality was always tribal. It was always tribal. Each tribe, each set of people on the earth, they had their own gods. So the reason for that was because, you know, they had different ancestry. And when you try to work with or venerate a god that comes from another tribe, it does nothing for you. Okay. And the woke people will say, oh, it's racist, it's not inclusive. But it doesn't work. All you're doing is giving away your power to another group of people and disempowering yourself. So it has fallen out of favor to have this tribal mindset, but I will say that it's the only one that works. I want everyone, you know, wherever they're from, whatever race they are, to return to their roots, because that is truly the way that we will heal this planet.
Mm-hmm.
It's not by having one god, because we're not all the same. We come, you know, we have different, we originated from different places. It's the connection that we have with the land as well.
Absolutely. And that brings me to another question, because, you know, we talked about Chiron and Aries But what role specifically, since it's kind of, Chiron is all about wounds, the wounded healer. So for people unfamiliar with that Chiron archetype that is again coming up specifically in identity, what role does Chiron play in the chart, and how do you advise people working with Chiron?
Yeah, Chiron is a very special object, and it surprises me that there are still some astrologers who don't work with it, which is a mistake, because Chiron can be the gold in your chart, because everyone's wounded. You know, we all have issues. We've all, part of the life experience on Earth is to become wounded
Yeah.
and just, get on with it. But it will show that person's kind of first wound, usually in childhood, but it will also show where they have the potential to become a teacher of the theme of that wound. If we look at the mythology of Chiron, he had a hard life. That guy, he struggled from the day that he was born. He was rejected by his mother. And then Apollo, the god Apollo, and his sister Artemis, they decided that they would adopt him, because they obviously saw something special within Chiron. Chiron was a centaur, so he didn't actually fit in with the other centaurs, because they were beastly and fornicating and drinking alcohol, and he was like really refined and kind of special. But he didn't fit in with the gods either, because he looked beastly. But Chiron struggled on. He was known as the wise and the justice of them all, and he became a teacher. And he taught the Chironic arts and the healing arts. And I think that we all need to take a bit of inspiration from his story, in that there's a tendency for most people to wallow now and use their wounds as an excuse to, I don't know, be a shitty person or just not be successful in life. And Chiron never did that. So its placement within the chart is definitely very special. I mean, in my own chart, I have it in the 12th house.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the 12th house is the house of the subconscious. It's not going to be obvious to that person when they have a bunch of planets in the 12th house, or one planet. That stuff is kind of hidden from themselves. So in my experience, I spent a long time in denial about stuff that had happened to me. With Chiron in the 12th, it was also about hidden enemies. There was a death threat on my family, but I never actually saw their faces.
Yeah.
I didn't know their names. So what that did was that I grew up then with a very deep suspicion of people that I didn't know. And it played out a lot for me in relationships. I saw this person as being, my enemy. And it was very destructive, for me, until I got a hold of that. But once you master that, then you can, I'm a good example of that. I can help others through these issues.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, a 12th house placement with Chiron, it makes sense, the work that you do then, as an astrologer, and guiding people through all of the troubles that they're having and all the difficult transits. And it's amazing when you get to work with that Chiron energy in a positive way after you kind of come on the other side of it. And 12th house is always something that's just been so fascinating for me, because it's such a, like you said, it's the unconscious, it's the blind spot, it's the stuff that we don't see, yet it's also such a mystical house and a spiritual house. And being a Pisces sun, and I have a few planets in the 12th house, it's been interesting to see how some of those 12th house themes play out in your life. And I feel like, on the one hand, I was like, oh boy, I don't want to have all this stuff in my 12th house. But then I kind of realized that I am probably interested in the things I am because of that. Like homeopathy, it's like literally an immaterial medicine, and it's cool to, to be able to see that going back to that what I was talking about earlier with people not liking aspects of their charts, it makes you who you are though. You wouldn't
Yeah.
be who you are without it. And um, it's definitely been interesting with Neptune and Pisces for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
In my 12th, but it's just yeah, it's interesting. It's like it really is what shapes us and what ends up making us who we are as people. And it's like that's why it's so important. I mean, if I could tell everybody to have like an astrological yearly checkup, instead of going to get your physical, you call your astrologer, you get your a yearly checkup, and or more often, whatever you need. And it's just so tremendously beneficial because, again, if you know how to work with the energy, no matter what the energy is, it's like it's like you were saying, forewarned is forearmed. And then combine that with an ancestral path and taking good care of your body and all the things that we talk about on this podcast. And it's like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be rocky. Yeah. There's going to be challenges, but that's life.
Yeah, if you do all of those things, you become the enemy of the state. You become the enemy of the machine, the matrix, the system. That
Yeah.
is what they don't want. So even more reason to do that.
I know it's good motivation, isn't it? It's like, you know what? I'm gonna work on myself so much, completely divorce myself from the system that I don't even care what they're doing.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely something that falls under Chiron and Aries.
Mm.
It's that, who am I? And also Aries is the planet of warfare.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I think some people are waking up. It's not going to be like everyone, but I think there's a lot of people being affected by the consciousness of Odin in particular.
Mm.
But sometimes when people wake up, they're really fucking angry.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that with a lot of these protests, growing in size every time
Yeah.
there's one. So that's a very Chiron and Aries type of event that's happening.
Oh, for sure. And it's like to the point where they can't even pretend it's not happening. They have to cover it in some capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I've said a couple of times that I think that Chiron and Aries making it sextile to Saturn and Aquarius this year in many ways is kind of the saving grace of the whole thing.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
yeah, those two are in sextile all year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really that wounded chironic person rising up against the system of control, which is Saturn. So
Mm-hmm.
it is present in the sky. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, there is no spiritual awakening. Yes, there is. If you went out to one of those protests, you would see that. Each time they're getting more fierce. There's more and more people joining. And it's like a domino effect. One thing leads to another. Oh, they're not telling the truth about this. What else have they lied about?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it starts. It's not about people singing Kumbaya on a hill with the sunrise behind them. It's about people realizing that they have
Stop.
they've been fucking lied to all
Yeah.
their lives. They've been told to avoid the things that are beneficial to them, that will nourish them on a soul level, on a physical level, and to go through this false plastic path. In terms of their spiritual lives and also the food that they eat, the medicine that they use. So
Mm-hmm.
we are seeing the start of the awakening, which I think is why the control system is being so full on at the moment.
It's like basically if you just take the rule of thumb that you just do the opposite of whatever you've been told to do, you'll be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I have to say, Kaylee, I absolutely agree with you. And I learned that at a very, very young age because I have autoimmune issues.
Yeah.
And when my mother would take me to the hospital and I was getting my checkups and all of that, they would literally tell me to do the things that were so bad for me that were going to cause a flare, unhealthy foods. So I realized back then that they were kind of full of it and
Yeah.
didn't know what they were doing. So I'm grateful for that experience because I probably think that it really strengthened my BS detector.
100%. I can completely relate to that. I feel like, I've had health issues basically since I was born to some degree or another. And it's like, even when I was a kid going to these doctors, it was much like you when you went to church. You're just like, this is bullshit. Like, they're not listening to me. They think I'm a liar. They think I'm like exaggerating, or because they don't know the answer. So they're like, oh, she's just, I don't know why this is happening, but don't change anything about the lifestyle because it has no impact. And so it just
Yeah.
pushes you to, I'm happy as well for my experience with that early on, because I'm just like, man, it just completely have left that system for years now. And I'm grateful. It almost feels like part of that time in my life, and I'm sure in yours as well, is prepared you for this moment where you're like, you can't tell me anything about this situation is accurate, or that they're actually, providing helpful information for people right now during what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. And for absolutely. For those of us that have had those early experiences with the hospitals and the doctors and that, or really anyone in authority, bad
Mhm.
experiences, probably we did have to experience that so that we could be the awake ones right now.
I agree completely. It feels that way. It's like a training camp almost. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, especially for those of us that have 12th house planets.
uh,
I have been I have been training for this moment all of my life.
100%. I know. It's there's no escaping it. It's like, all right, got to be of service and help people out with this, because, what else am I going to do? It's like,
Yeah.
but that is, kind of coming around to what we were talking about in the beginning about, there are some things that are just completely, we agreed to this, it's faded. And it's like, even if I didn't want to be a homeopath, like, there's no other path for me. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? It's like, it's such an obvious, like, this is what I'm meant to do. And I'm meant to guide people in this time that, like, if I didn't do it, it would be like you're saying, it would be like resistance after resistance to pull me back into it. And I've talked to other people in the healing profession that have felt the same way. They've tried to get another job and they just get pushed back into it eventually anyway. So
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, especially when you're looking at folks that are basically, they feel like they have no choice but to take the vaccine right now.
yeah.
And someone that, like yourself, homeopaths, naturopaths, they are going to be the people that could possibly help them with side effects.
Yes.
Because I know that some people, I have read about some people getting vaccinated and taking homeopathy, and they haven't had the, horrible side effects that other people have experienced.
Yeah, I just took another webinar this weekend with a homeopath who's in the Netherlands, and they made remedies from directly from the injections, and
Mm-hmm.
based on whatever one they took, they'll give them that one, and there's even a remedy made from the mRNA.
Yep.
So there's solutions, people. I can't get too much into it on this podcast.
Yeah, you're
But
you're totally right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I want that to be very clear, though, like, to anybody listening, that if you're afraid for your family or your friends, or I just talked to a couple of people this morning in the office. They work in a government position, or they work in a hospital, and it's like they're being bullied ruthlessly. Their kids are
Mm-hmm.
being bullied, and it's like there's ways around it, but also if you have somebody who has suffered from it, there are solutions out there. 100%.
Yeah, I agree so much. And I think that it's got to the point where, people are only really looking at road A or road B. There's a third road.
Yeah.
And, if you feel pushed into that so much, there are people that can help, because there's a lot of panic, and people that just don't want to fucking take it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of panic, and they're like, what are we going to do? if
Yeah.
they, especially in places in Europe, and I know certain parts of the US, are really bad for the vaccine pushing right now. I mean,
Mhm.
what if they make it that we can't go to the grocery store,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
you can't go and pick up your kids from school? I mean, I don't know if it's going to get that bad, but the way things
Mhm.
are going, like, it's not really, it doesn't seem like a nightmare fairy tale anymore, does it? So research the alternatives, because there are a lot of very skilled people out there that can deal with it.
And regardless, we are really being pushed to take care of our health at this time because nobody's going to do it for us. I mean, there we have to take ownership of our health so that this doesn't happen again. And it's never going to be everybody that's going to take ownership. That's just not reality. But if enough of us do, people who are on a good homeopathic remedy, they first of all, let's just say their immunity goes up,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not affected by these things, and they can have peace of mind. Like you said, it's like it seems like there's two roads. One is like follow everything they're saying and live in fear. The other path is live in fear, and be so active against it and feel like you have no options. There's a third
Mm-hmm.
path where there's many, many, many options. They just don't want you to know about that third path. They want to keep you in conflict and fear. And that's why I feel so grateful to be aware of these things. And that's part of my mission with the podcast, is just to make people aware of things that aren't really talked about, because even, natural medicine, nobody talks about constitutional homeopathy and using, astrology to break family curses and all of
Mm-hmm.
these things they're so deep and that have literally life-changing effects. And so that was really what drives me to bring people on like yourself, Fiona, to just inspire other people to get the resources that they need, and to be assisted during this time.
Yeah, because in inverted commas, they rely on people not believing in astrology or homeopathy,
Mm-hmm.
or plant medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So the best way to get through this, I personally feel, is to outsmart them,
Mm-hmm.
which you can do for seeking solutions. You can also, I mean, I'm just talking about to the poor people who think that they're going to lose their job.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to feed my kids? The other thing that you can do is you look at your astrology transits,
Mm.
right? So what are my transits doing, over the next couple of years? Is there anything that could potentially indicate a really bad health crisis?
Mm-hmm.
So I would also check that, because I know that in terms of pharmaceutical meds, that some people have very bad reactions and other people don't have any. So
Yeah.
you can look at your transits to get an idea as to, what ways is going to affect me.
I love that you bring that up too. It's such a good resource for people, because it's true. Like, the people that I see in practice when I'm shadowing in school is like there's people from both sides who have gotten it, who have not gotten it. And I can't lie and say every person who has gotten this has had terrible reaction and nobody should get it. And, that's something that you have to personally decide for yourself. And when you look at the chart and look at, like Fiona's talking about, do you have harsh sixth house transits? What is
Mm-hmm.
your health like right now? Do you have an autoimmune condition? Everything like that. It's like then you can make an informed decision outside of fear. And as long as it's resonant within you and what you feel like is right for you, and it's not because you're being coerced, then
Yeah.
do whatever you want. It's not for me to say.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that we're getting a lot of that pressure from the alternative community as well.
Yeah,
The both sides are really hissing at each other, and
totally.
yeah, like, we have to understand that one person's story is not going to be the same as another's. They have to weigh up the pros and cons, and they have to make their own choices.
Life is
So
never that black and white.
it's not, and I tell you, Kaylee, like, I started doing a lot of research, into conspiracy in inverted commas,
Mm-hmm.
way back in, I guess, the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's when I discovered Michael Tazarian,
Yeah.
and, we started watching a bunch of stuff that really blew my mind. But I remember watching some things on, I think it was MySpace, back in the day. I miss those days.
I know. Like, me too.
People would post some things about stuff that they said was going to happen. This was the alternative community. And, some of it never happened.
Yeah.
And I remember some stories very clearly, and it just never came to fruition. And these were things that were really going round and round. So we have to understand that the alternative community can be wrong as well.
Yes, and I was just talking to Em about this the other day. I'm sure you saw it too for the conjunction in December. What was it, the 21st?
Yeah.
Like the theories of what would happen. Like, I mean, I saw anything from fallout in the sky or like, I mean, it was just like complete societal meltdown to like, stock up on food. And it was just like this, they put it on like a specific date as if the conjunction is just gonna like completely change the world on that day specifically. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It's like it, and I agree with you. And I think that's a lesson that I learned big time last year is to really manage your energy with that stuff. Like, I mean, I'm all for people looking into everything. And I think you should. I think you should. Because there's been a lot that has come to fruition too. But it's like, but like keep it in check
yeah.
and don't see it as gospel because it's just not. I mean, there's a lot that's been wrong. Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of it is just someone's opinion.
Yeah.
And it's uninformed. And the thing about, people saying that aliens are going to come from the sky on the Saturn Jupiter conjunction, and there's going to be like a nuclear war or whatever it is that they said. They're going to get loads of views on their YouTube
Exactly.
channel. You can monetize that. So we have to understand that sensationalism doesn't just occur within the mainstream media. It's also occurring with, people's YouTube channels and other websites.
Oh my God. I love that you brought that up. It's been on my mind so much recently. And it's like you want to really use your intuition in these days about who you listen to. It's like, again, it's that middle path of truth, but not sensationalism. And you can really just you can feel it, at least I can. You can develop that ability to just, like you were saying earlier, have a good BS detector. Does this person seem like they're in their right frame of mind? Does it
Hmm.
seem like they are trying to, get views, like you said, or clickbaiting you? Does that feel like, once you get past maybe the fear it brings up, does it actually feel right to you? Because you can never go wrong with that. And let's say, there was an energy potential for that based on the astrology. That's the one of my favorite things about astrology, though, is that you can never quite get a grasp on it. You never know how the energy is going to present, and there's always going to be a mystery to it, which I tend to like about it, actually.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because it's not fortune telling.
Yeah,
And
people don't understand that, Fiona. They don't.
yeah, I mean, I think to use it as simple fortune telling really reduces it into something very basic.
Mhm.
And it's not, it's very complex.
Mhm.
And it is, you're exactly right. I mean, you see, for example, that you have a Pluto transit in your eighth house or your seventh house coming up.
Mhm.
You can predict how that energy is going to feel.
Mhm.
You're going to be in a state of change. Your relationships are going to be transformed, but you can't say exactly who is going to be the catalyst for the change.
Mm.
Whether you meet someone or something along those lines. So it's kind of it's just so much more complex, especially when you're doing predictions for the likes of famous people,
Yeah.
because we don't know exactly where they are on
Mhm.
their, say for their example, their birthdays. I mean, astrologers will use solar returns, lunar returns those type of charts, which depends on location.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking at someone famous, we have no idea where they're going to be on their birthday. So it becomes more difficult when you can't ask them direct questions as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And that's an interesting thing that you bring up too. It's like you can really predict the frame of mind, or like the psychology of, how you're going to feel, and maybe what thoughts are going to pop up, what themes you're going to be experiencing, maybe things coming up, from the past. Um, I completely agree. That's something that I really have seen consistently, is like I'll feel that certain way, and then how it plays out, the catalyst, like you were saying, it's always a mystery and a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, that was the other thing, is that, when people were trying to understand what was happening next, say last year, it makes sense because there was a lot, and it's kind of fun in a way to say, oh, who's going to win the election, or when are the lockdowns going to end, or anything like that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
such a powerful tool for that. But it's just, again, to use your discernment. If somebody is saying 100% this is going to happen and
Yeah.
this is the result, it's just like, be wary of people who are speaking in absolutes, whether it be about the vaccine, whether it be about when the lockdown's going to end, because truthfully, nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
There are amazing, competent astrologers, like yourself, Fiona, who have a really good idea of what we'll be experiencing. But it's like, the people out there that are saying this is going to happen 100%. You need to be, I mean, you see it, outside of astrology too, obviously, like you're saying, in the truth movement or whatever it is. It's just like, and then
Yeah.
the goalpost gets moved, or,
Yeah.
oh,
Well, that's it.
actually it
That's
was
it.
this day, or,
Yeah, and a lot of it is clickbait, like we
yeah,
just said there. So I'll be honest, I really don't follow um anyone now in terms of, like, I guess the truther movement, apart from David Whitehead and,
yeah,
of course, Michael Desarian, because they're very balanced and measured.
exactly.
Um, yeah, and it's not all sensationalized, but there's a lot of folks who are extremely popular and people are following them, as if they're religious figures.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
scary
it
because
is.
the truth is that our world is not going to change. We're not going to be free. We're not going to break out of the matrix until people decide to do it themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
So following someone, every video they make, every post, and taking it all as gospel, and not thinking for yourself, not making the changes in your life that you need to make in order to become a free human being.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, no one's going to wake up that way. I mean, you don't wake up by information. Put it that way. Yeah, you don't. You wake up through your spiritual path. It has to be on a spiritual level.
And it's interesting because when you're consuming that information, you can trick yourself into thinking that you are taking action
Yeah.
when you're actually not, you know?
Yeah. When you're lying in bed at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
and you've watched like 50 videos about the royal family being reptilians. And
Yeah.
then you know that you only have like 4 hours to go until you wake up, and you have to go and do your job while you're half asleep,
Yeah.
and you can't function, and your anxiety levels are through the roof, and you're just in this constant state of fear and anxiety. That's not spiritual awakening. That's abuse that you're doing to yourself.
Yes, yes, because like obviously, I'm sure my listeners know not to watch the news and to not listen to all of that stuff that's going on. But then again, it's like we can fall into the trap on the other side, like you're saying. And
Yeah,
that isn't talked
yeah.
about enough.
Yeah, and I think we all fell into that trap, especially last year.
Yeah.
We were all sitting on the edge of our seats and, waiting for stuff to happen. But in the end, I think the healthy thing to do was, do you know what? I'm gonna just turn all of this off,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm gonna focus on my spiritual path. I'm gonna read some books about polytheism at night, or astrology,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the way that I'm going to change the world, because it is true that the world, you have to be the change that you see in
Yeah.
the world. You do.
Yeah, that was totally lesson number one, I think, from last year, 100%, is that no one's coming to save you. You're going to have to do the work yourself. And if you have that amount of time to invest in, the reptilian overlords,
Yeah.
you're not investing enough time in yourself. And, what could happen tomorrow? It's like, you don't even know if you get tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like,
Yeah.
you need to focus on you today and to do that every single day so that you have a good future, because every day counts and every day is a gift. And to give all that energy away, whether it be because you think you're more in tune with what's going on or not, if it's taking away from your goals and your own life, then it's unhealthy no matter what it is.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree with you 100%. I mean, our ancestors wouldn't have sat around waiting for someone to come and save them.
Yeah.
They would have done it themselves. I mean, their focus was putting food on their table, raising their kids, doing their rituals. They just got on with things, and that's just what we have to do, because what we're experiencing at the moment is, of course, really scary,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of uncharted territory for a lot of people around the world. But thousands of years ago, if invaders came to your village and they they burnt your village down, or you heard news of Vikings coming and you knew that they were only 24 hours away, it
Mm-hmm.
would have been a worse type of fear that they were dealing with.
Yeah.
And you know, it was like a real war between life and death. So I think we have it easy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like what's coming to mind is like the rune Hagalas, like that picture of like hail coming down on the farmland. It's like, oh, you don't have any food to eat now.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Yeah.
know? It's like you can't go down the store to the grocery store, regardless of if you have to wear a mask or not.
Yeah.
Excuse
You
me.
know what you do then? You grow your own food, or you move somewhere where you can possibly make that happen. If you
Yeah.
can't do it by yourself, form a tribe
Yeah.
and buy it with other people, and just get back to the land and the way that things were done.
Exactly. And I hope that that's what we're moving toward too, is like, with Saturn being in Aquarius, it's a lot easier to form friendships online. But I hope that eventually we'll move toward being able to form that in real life and to build those tribes again, because I think that would quell a lot of fear that people are experiencing, because it's not really natural to live how we do, so isolated and suspicious of your neighbor, and your neighbor doesn't even wave to you. And you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and picking up little packages from the grocery store, with little cellophane wrappers on them,
Yeah.
and having no connection to the lands, and buying stuff that's come from halfway across the world.
Yeah.
I think that we should have an ancestral diet as well as an ancestral spiritual path. I think it all ties in together.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that was one of the big things we covered when I was training to be a nutritionist, is, looking up Weston Price and seeing what did your ancestors eat and how did they live, and because their health was definitely a lot better than ours is today. There's a reason for
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, they ate everything that we're advised not to
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, basically, if you have to rely on, getting your produce from, I always laugh, like when I visit Florida, for example, it's like the land of oranges, and they're getting their oranges from California, and then California is getting their oranges from Florida.
Wow,
There's something
really?
very wrong.
That is so messed up. Yeah.
It's like, what happened? What happened? Why are we getting our produce from Argentina? It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's the same in Ireland. People have become used to having such a varied diet. They want to
Yeah.
have they want to have Thai one day, then the next day they want to have Indian. So it's just, and all of those foods, of course, would be not native to here, and they come halfway across the world. So in Ireland, we have our animals are actually raised in a really humane way.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
yeah, uh, our animal welfare is really good over here, and they are out to pasture. You know, the cattle mostly are. I personally wouldn't eat anything that wasn't, and it's
Yeah,
really easy for me to find that meat here. So I think that we've become spoiled by choice,
I agree.
bombarded by choices, and you want to have something different every day, and it's really bad for your system. I mean, nature is so intelligent. Like in the winter here, stuff like potatoes, turnips, carrots, onions, you know, those kind of foods that are very warming.
Yeah,
That's what's in season, and that's what our body needs in the winter season. It needs to be warmed and nourished. It doesn't need like cold sushi,
yeah,
you know, or fruit salads, or like
yeah.
a chilled sandwich, because of course, in terms of traditional Chinese medicine, that will give you damp conditions. And Ireland is really damp and it's cold in the winter.
Yeah.
So people are so detached from even that concept of energy.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we have like one of the best growing seasons here in the Pacific Northwest of any region in the country, I think outside of California. And people are still disconnected from that, even though we have honestly so much produce year round. You know, we have so many native mushrooms and root vegetables in the winter, and just there's so much, but you know, because of the grocery store, the big box stores, which I hope will also start to crumble, to be frank.
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, it's like you mean I can't get a you know a tomato in December, you know?
Yeah,
And it just goes
yeah.
back to that lack of connection, you know, that lack of connection to ancestors, to the land. It all comes from the same place, I think, that same trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the age of ignorance, you know,
Yep.
really. Access to all of any information that you want is at your fingertips, but all of the connection with, you know, with the land and our own bodies, our health, the food is kind of we've really lost all of that.
And I mean, you know, soon we'll just have lost, hopefully not, but it's like the direction it's going. People are like, oh, you know, we can just go to Mars. You know, we don't even have to connect to our planet, let alone our region, our ancestors.
Oh my goodness. What do you even say about that? It's just
What to say? You just,
yeah.
you know, speechless is my response, you know?
Well, you know, Mars, I've got Mars rising, so I might enjoy Mars. Maybe that's where you know, my native planet.
Yeah, same. I mean, I'm Aries rising, Aries moon, Venus and Aries. Love Aries, love Mars, but I
Yeah.
don't know. I think I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna let you know people work that out first. I'm gonna stay here.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Oh my gosh. Well, Fiona, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I so appreciate you being on today. I'd love to have you back in the future, and I
Mm-hmm.
just want to make sure that you tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, and I definitely will come back. Thanks, Kaylee. My website is www.fionaedgar.com. It's Aedgar. And I also have a YouTube channel if you just search for Fiona Edgar. And I also make almost daily astrology voice clips on Telegram.
Yeah, those voice clips are awesome. They're just a great thing to listen to in the morning with your coffee or your tea. I definitely recommend everybody go follow Fiona on all of those things, platforms. And yeah, thank you, Fiona. I'll have the links below as well. And I will catch you next time, Fiona. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Kaylee. Take care. I'll chat to you soon.